don't believe a letter of intent gives away the
It
authority.
does. Did you read it here? Letter of intent.
I know what it says.
They've recommended letters bind, so that means the board has given up its authority. Letters of intent bind the Board of Education to employ candidates. Bind. That's the board giving away its authority.
I'm quite aware of that, but it also says it will come back in front of the board for board approval before she actually hires. So it's not binding until it is approved by the board. And if I am correct, most letters of intent have in it a stipulation that it's pending board approval.
No, that's not true. Not one letter of intent.
Perhaps
No.
ours need to add that language, because that's what's the, I mean, if we were going to have a discussion, maybe the discussion needs to be on what our letters of intent say. Because most letters of intent, and if this is a question that we're not sure as to what it is, maybe we should ask our solicitor to go and get sample of letters of intent from other boards. But the other boards that I have seen, the letters of intent stipulates per board approval, which does not authorize us to give away our ability to hire, but does allow the superintendent of that respective board, where ours or someone else's, to at least give the indication to the candidate that they intend to hire, pending board approval.
That's how the normal hiring process works.
Correct.
This is separate from that.
Why is it separate?
This is giving the superintendent the ability to give a letter of intent to hire, and that the board then, at its next meeting, must vote yes.
Does it say that the board must vote yes?
It says bind.
So what are we asking? Are we asking maybe the proper discussion right now as to whether or not this particular item needs to be revised so it reflects correctly as to what the actual letter of intent should be, rather than to say no?
Well, I disagree. I believe strongly from the abuse that we had last year that this board should say no.
And we're talking about
And
abuse
if the
that was not a
superintendent
part of
then
this
comes out and says,
administration.
has somebody that she thinks that we need to have a special meeting for and meet possibly hire, we'll do that.
So I understand about abuse, and I understand about things that have been done in the past. However, do we punish the current administration for things that have been done, even based on a learning curve? Because if we have a strong objection to something, then let's make it correct and put in place and have it as a correct documentation that allows us to have it used in its correct format. But to absolutely say no, and I understand that is your opinion, Mr. President, but that is your opinion and your opinion only. This board is a board of 9 that must move as a unit. So I understand that you are objecting to this, but if right now if the question is a letter of intent, as I have seen it on other boards, the letter stipulates that it is pending board approval. And they're very important in regards to being able to solicit and solidify candidates so that we at least allow them to know that we're interested. So it's not the letter of intent that's wrong. It might have been the utilization. So let's correct the motion so that it is reflective and give our superintendent the same powers that are used across the state and other boards.
No, see, I think you're confusing. Whenever there's a hire and the interview process goes through, they are contacted and told and given a letter saying that they are being recommended to hire by the Board of Education.
That's a letter of intent.
Right. This is different.
How is that different?
This is different. This binds the board.
So if you're saying that this, whatever this language is separate, then this is not a letter of intent, because what we're actually saying is a letter of intent, and what this is, you're
This is
saying.
a letter of intent to hire.
That's what you do when you're interviewing on the final candidate and bringing them before the board. That's what it's called. So if we're talking about semantics, then let's correct the semantics. But to say no to something because we're discussing the semantics of whether it's called apple or potato, it's the same thing.
Well, I disagree with you strongly.
That's fine.
And I guess we're going to have a vote tonight. I'm going to recommend the board not go for it.
Yeah, but you know, I have a problem with any of us putting pressure or creating a climate that will sort of have you leave your independent judgment. So I'm not really want to accept the president's wording by putting his opinion upon the shoulders of the board members who are responsible to bring independent judgment and not to give that up. So I caution the board president in his approach in terms of using that type of language and dialogue to persuade the board to most likely give up an independent judgment. So that I'm going to go on record with verbatim, Mr. Oberg.
Yes.
And I don't want to hear it again because it definitely persuades the board members to violate their bylaw and their oath by strongly recommending that they give up their independent judgment to shoot down a resolution that they have a duty to come and evaluate and express their independent judgment.
So, Mr. Starr, I just want to clarify something.
Yes, Mr. President.
So, if board members agree with your position, they have independent judgment.
I'm not persuading anybody. I'm not
Let me finish,
persuading.
Mr. Starr.
Hey, I'm not
Let me finish,
persuading.
Mr. Starr.
I'm not telling the board members to vote left, right, up, or down. You are, and that is a violation.
I have
So, wait a minute now.
You are recommending.
No, I know
yes,
you're recommending.
I'm recommending I vote
No,
no.
you're recommending. You're recommending that the board not support something. Am I right?
Yes,
You're doing that,
perfectly.
And you're recommending.
You're publicly doing that.
And you're recommending.
and you're out of line. And I warned you about that. And I want this on record verbatim, and I've got to see it that way. Verbatim. I don't want any hidden wording in the minutes in terms of what this discussion is about. And I warn you not to do it again.
President?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, actually, I listen to all the stakeholders well. And why I say, because, I got no opposed to let it attend to time. Because I recognize the superintendent is quality to do administrative work. But at the same time, the president would have raised serious issues about the bill. And yes, I think the matter itself is merit for further review. And I don't see anything wrong with, suggestion, people for further discussion about this. Everybody has been trying to get an independent opinion about how you feel about the issue. But it's no business, to say, if you pay how you vote independent board member voting. So I got my opinion because that really create a lot of implications for public-employee relationship and also the district issue. So my personal, is this issue need to be further reviewed, even tonight or at any time. I'm more than welcome to do it. But I think as long as we finalize it about it, it will create a good practice on this thing.
Board President, I have a statement. Sure. Item number 70, the wording on item number 70 is directly from a board agenda of year 2010. And I would like to clarify, or state, not clarify, but to state publicly that as superintendent, the accountability for myself and my staff to hire highly qualified individuals as per regulation is something that I hold professionally to a high standard, not just before this board, but because we have an accountability to hire appropriate staff to teach, educate our children. It is my intent to work collaboratively with this board and in a transparent way about any individual that we hire. We are at this moment working collectively as a team to create processes, procedures that really provide us with a way of identifying the most highly qualified candidates that meet our standards, the standards of this state, and that meet the needs of our children. So not having been here, I do want to state to this board that I stand ready to work with this board, my staff, to ensure that we comply with regulation, that we are transparent. I believe that every time that this board member have requested information about personnel, we have been forthright. And we have shared information both publicly and in executive session. And it is my response to be able to continue to do that. And I just want to ensure that regardless of previous actions, the intent of this number 70 was to continue a practice that allowed for hiring individuals that are highly qualified and benefit the needs of this district and our children.
Mr. President, if I may just weigh in quickly on this situation here. I am not comfortable with the wording of number 70. I think that this wording takes away the power of the board to approve any hire. The way it is written here is that the recommended letters by the Board of Education, the superintendent will notify the members of the board. Not that they will approve it, not that it will be voted on. And I'm not saying that you obviously took this from previous
From the
things
2010 agenda.
before I was on the board at that time. I am not comfortable with that. I think that I am basically giving up my right as a board member to have any say about the people that are being introduced into the district. Now, that being said, I think that you and your staff absolutely follow procedures, are going to find us the highly qualified people. But I still, as a board member, have the right to approve any of those. And I think the wording here does not allow for that to happen. Now, whether you want to change that, whether we're, shifting what we're talking about or what have you, I think that should be open to discussion and maybe should not be voted on at this time. Additionally, in the past, I know last year that any letters of intent to hire did have an expiration date. So we allowed that to happen, I believe, last year over the summer months when we were not all available as quickly for an emergency meeting or something of that sort. But the other part of this that makes it uncomfortable for me is that you're asking to extend to the whole year.
Ma'am, the summer month, particularly August, is the most critical issue. One of the main factors that we have addressed in the processes for hiring is to ensure that we are anticipating vacancies, that is, retirement and resignation. Matter of fact, in the last week, if Mr. Brzezinski corrects me if I'm wrong, we had at least 2 to 3 resignations. So, and these are on this agenda. So, in not knowing immediate resignation, because we should be able to, with good probability, anticipate retirements, given the timeline. The issue at hand is resignations and being able to quickly provide holding for highly qualified personnel, particularly in South Jersey, Camden County, which is highly competitive, so that we're able to at least provide information to the candidate that there is high probability of hiring, because we don't want to lose folks who are good for our kids. So if you're saying that the time period is an issue, then let's revise the wording, knowing that the urgency, because I just heard you say, wait, the urgency is pressing right before us. It is right now being able to hire highly qualified candidates, as we know, and it's letters of intent to be able to indicate to them that we want to hire them, and it requires board approval.
Yes.
Because we don't want to lose them to the neighbor next door.
As the motion reads here, I'm sorry for interrupting. As the motion reads here, that is not what the letter of intent is defined as in this motion.
And I hear what you're saying, and I'm saying
So,
I'm changing.
So if it's, revised, maybe that's a different, story, but as it is here, I can tell you now, I would vote no to this, because I think this takes the power of the board away,
If I may.
as it is right here.
That was Dr. Monahan.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm not-
Yeah, but if I may, I'd like to respond to Dr.